Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real Positive Girl podcast with me, Sabrina. This is the show that'll help you become your best self, which we are all on a journey of doing every single day. And today we're talking about how you are not defined by your past. Before we jump into that, I do want to, as always, welcome you over to my Instagram. I'm at Sabrina Joy Perozzo, and I would love to hear from you, chat with you, and get any feedback or topic suggestions from you. If you have any prayer requests or you just need some encouragement, I am there for you. So just come on over, or you're welcome to send me a traditional email at realpositivegirlpodcast@gmail.com. All of that information is available for you in the show notes below, but I definitely want to invite you to become friends with me online. That'd be so super cool. But let's jump into the episode. So today we are talking about you are not defined by your past. So let me ask you a question. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about how something that happened in the past could have gone differently? Because I do. I used to spend a ton of time really ruminating about the past, accompanied by a brick ton of regrets because of whatever happened, like whatever it was, definitely laden in regret. Even if it was something I couldn't control. A lot of situations happened to me, as I've shared throughout the show, that, it was a tough childhood for me. I had physical and mentally abusive parents, and my mom was a drug dealer and passed away when I was just barely a teenager, and all kinds of other crap just went on. And so there are definitely a lot of situations for me, as I know that for a lot of you, that were out of your control, but there was still the guilt, there was still the regret, there was still those negative feelings attached to those situations where you continually be like, well, how could this have turned out differently? Could I have done this, that, or the other? And, I usually end up believing that if I wasn't there to witness what happened or somehow involved, even in the most minuscule way, then it wouldn't have happened, right? Do you ever think about that? You're like, well, if I just wasn't there, it wouldn't have happened. And that's not actually completely true, because maybe it would have still happened whether you were there or not. You just feel like you're part of that experience now. But all of that does nothing to reverse what happened, who was involved, or how it may or may not affect your future, right? It does nothing. It does nothing. We spend all this time and energy, so much mental energy, really focusing on what could be done differently. And there is a breaking point where that actually is super helpful. And most of us go past that breaking point, because usually that breaking point is a very short period of time, maybe a day or two, depending upon how deep and exhaustive and serious the situation was. But, there was times where I'll still think back to something that happened like 20 years ago and be like, well, if I only had done this. And it's just not helpful. And I'm here to tell you that no matter how much time you spend thinking about how things could have gone better and, really leaning into hindsight being 2020, because that's what a lot of us are doing, it won't make any different, anything better. There will be no difference at all. There really won't. It will actually make it more difficult to move forward and leave the issues behind you. And, you can see the truth in that, because if you're still ruminating about something that happened 20 years ago, or even 5 weeks ago, and there was no reason to continue to think about it or glean any sort of lessons from it, then it's obviously holding you back. It's not allowing you to move forward. But here's your quick silver lining. At least you're not alone, right? You got me, you got other people that so many people in the entire world. You're not alone. Most people go through moments that feel regretful and awful at the time, right? Those emotions are so heightened and strong in the moment of those experiences happening. But a lot of times it's not as bad as it seems, right? And you're probably like, what are you talking about? It was terrible. It can seem worse than it is because you pick apart everything, right? The detailed examination of everything is the problem. It is the biggest problem. Because think about it. Like, think about anything that has happened in the last like year or two that's been a big deal, something that you continually think back on. You try to like figure out how could have been done differently, how could have been better, how could it not turned out the way it did, and how it could have turned out the way that you wanted it to. That still involves control issues as well. Let me just drop that in there for you. But it's picking it apart. It's thinking about it over and over again, thinking that you will find some sort of magical step in there that you could have done or can be done now that will change what the outcome was. But really, you can't. And I understand how this is helpful sometimes when serious events occur, but usually not. Usually not. These are just great ways to learn lessons and become stronger. That is what these experiences teach us. We become our best selves in these moments. I promise you. And, it's so tough. I know that it's so tough, and it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. But, I'm sure you also may worry about what others think of you when hearing of your past. That was definitely something that really freaked me out when I was younger. And it's funny because when I reflect back on my childhood, I realized that I hid it so well. So well. I mean, at least when I talk to people, I remember when I went to, was it our 10? Yeah, I think it's our 10-year high school reunion, or 15 or something like that. And we were talking about different things and who we thought we were in high school, as you do, and just reflect on the past. And people that I told what was actually happening to me in my life, in my home and stuff like that, didn't know. They didn't know. They had no idea. They admitted they had no idea. My best friend had no idea why I would want to spend every single day after school with her if I for the first 2 or 3 years before I got a job, and then I just had to go to work after school every day. She never knew. She never knew, understood what's happening. So, I, just like many of us, would worry about what other people thought of hearing about my past and what I was going through. And I used to worry about this for the longest time. The longest time, I was really ashamed of my past. But I'll tell you, I eventually became tired of holding myself back from doing what I wanted to just because I was worried about what others would say and think. Yeah, it was tiring. And I believe that I've spoken about this before, talking about how it can be so easy to put a mask on. It can be so easy to pretend that we're okay and that we're fine and that we're these different people, these people that we spend so much time, hours, days, years aspiring to be, wishing we could be, and not realizing in reality we could be those people. But we have to go through the hard work of dealing with our emotions and our feelings. It can't just be magic. But, we just pretend, right? And I was so tired from pretending. I was so tired from having to hold all of that weight on my shoulders, and not really being able to participate fully in when people talked about what they went through when they're younger, and actually practicing vulnerability, right? Which is something that is so super important. I really wish that I was more vulnerable even 10 years ago, which would have been a lot to bear, but it would have just been so much healthier, right? So anyway, but I became tired, and maybe someone else out there will also agree with that. And maybe that's where you came from, where you're I just got so sick and tired of holding myself back and really worrying about what people would say and think of you. And, and that's not to say that I don't still worry about these things, but I am more mindful about it. I take more time to really think okay, if I am super worried, I try to take a step back and examine well, why am I worried? Or what is the worst case scenario that could happen if they did find out about this, that, and the other? And is it really worth it to be worried about it? Is it really worth it to put all of this emotional energy into this thing when I could just do what makes me happy and not worry about them and know there will still be people in my life that will support me, that will be there for me, that will love me So just something to consider. But, even more than worrying about others' judgment, like other people's judgment, we actually suffer the most from our own, really, right? We think that we are so down and out because people are going to judge us or they have, and then that just, puts that historical stamp on like, okay, well, if one person did, then everyone is going to, right? That's like how it feels. But really, we endure the most pain because of what we're putting on ourselves. We're putting that pain and judgment and disappointment on ourselves. We allow the regret and failures and mistakes to pile up and become so big that it feels like we are living in the shadows of those things. We are living in the shadows of those experiences, those things that we consider to be tragic and horrible and awful, and things that we continue to look back and try to change in our mind and think, what could have been done, right? When nothing can be done because you can't change the past. The past is always evolving on its own, right? Because what's going to happen 30 minutes from now will eventually become the past, right? And so I know that's like a really deep way to think about it, but it is. The past is always changing. The future is ever present for us to take a hold of. And we just need to continue to move forward. But yeah, we live in the shadows of these regrets and failures and mistakes. It feels impossible, right? It feels impossible to not be defined by these things because we, yes, you and me, have inflated the negative experiences surrounding these events. We have, like, think about it. Like if you got a bad grade on like a test. I know this is a very simple example, but go with me. If you got a really bad grade on a test and you like the next test is like a month from now or something or whatever, right? And you just continually think, well, how could I have done differently? I could have done this, that, and the other. But really, I know that it's not easy. If you do it more often and practice it, it'll become easier. But if you really take time to step back and be like, okay, well, instead of really thinking about how terribly I did on this test and how I bombed it or whatever, think about like, okay, well, at least I can evaluate what I know and what I don't know by reflecting on like what answers I got correct and what I didn't get correct, right? And at least I, was there to take the test, and at least I have the opportunity to ask the teacher or whomever to maybe help me point out what I need to study on. And maybe this isn't something that fully affects like my grades and this, that, and the other, right? You really have to like widen your perspective of like not just zooming in on the negativity, but we do. We inflate it. We inflate it that it does become this large shadow that is just making us feel terrible, right? And we're holding ourselves back. It feels impossible. It feels impossible to not be defined by those things. And, instead, we should be adjusting our perspective. And I just have to keep saying that. I have to keep saying that so you get it, so you understand it, so you remember it. Because if we adjust our perspective to see how helpful going through adversity can be for us, it can really change our mindset when hard stuff happens. And I know it's never fun. It's never fun when it's happening, when you're in the moment. It's not. But valuable lessons are being learned to better prepare us for the future. And if we're able to train our mindsets to kind of like get in the thick of those experiences, and then even in the middle of it, or even like, a little bit after it, like widen our perspective, shift it a little bit, and then be like, oh, okay, wait. This probably isn't the end of the world. We can figure this out. We can use this for good and not evil towards ourselves. And that's what I truly believe. So I know that our pasts can be really heavy, like a ton of bricks. Believe me, the things that I've told you that I've gone through and the things that you know that you've gone through and other people have gone through, like it's super heavy. It can be this great burden to bear that seems to always be getting heavier. Like someone's always adding a rock to your backpack that's full of burdens. But I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to feel like that way forever. And I want you to know it's not easy to let go of your past and no longer let it define you, but it's necessary. And I do want you to know that it's not easy. Like, I am never here spouting like advice or thoughts or tips or anything and saying that working on your emotional health is easy, because it's not. And a lot of times it'll take us a few times to get it in line. You know, when you try to make changes in the beginning of usually a lot of things, most things, you might fail the first time and you're like, oh, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to change. I am going to forever be this way. But it's not true, right? But a lot of times we try the first time, we don't get it. We don't think we're smart enough to get it. We don't think that we're going to be able to accomplish this, especially if we know other people in our life that the first time is always the time where they learn it and they get it. Maybe they're faking it. Or maybe it's just those things that they're good at and you don't see the things that they're not good at right on the first time because they don't show you those things. Consider that too. So it's not easy, and that's okay. Life shouldn't be easy. If life was easy, it'd be so boring. Like, it's hard to say that, but because it would be really nice if life was easy, because then we wouldn't have to deal with trouble, but then we wouldn't grow as people, and it would be really boring. And then I don't know, what's the point? So, and I think that God wants us to continue to grow and go through adversity because it will strengthen us and continue to strengthen our faith in Him, right? So it's necessary. So today I want to share with you 5 ways to no longer let your past define you and move forward, feeling more free. Because the freedom part is the thing that always I have to remind myself of, right? So it's like nice to not ruminate over the fact that like these things have happened in the past and how could you have done it differently? Like, that's a waste of time and space in your mind. But it's that feeling of freedom, of being like, wow, I don't feel that burden as much anymore or at all. I don't know. It just depends. And it's amazing. So that's why I want to give you 5 tips on how to no longer let your past define you. And I really hope it helps. So let's dive in. So the first one, that's probably not a shock to anyone, is to learn to forgive whoever hurt you and forgive yourself. Of course, this is going to be the first one that I tell you because you have to forgive. It's really hard to move past something that hurt you or that was terrible, regretful, whatever, if you're not able to forgive yourself and then forgive whomever was involved, right? So, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. When I write notes for the show, just some like insider baseball, I don't generally put like examples of things. I just like off the top of my head, right? And so sometimes it takes me a little bit longer. And honestly, I prefer not to edit it out because I don't want you to think that I am perfect and polished. I am not. So if you want to learn to forgive whoever hurt you and forgive yourself. So an example for me would be that maybe I want to, or I did, forgive my father for, physically hurting me when I came home to visit during my first semester of college, which actually, it was the first and the last time that I came home during school, at least. I've been back to visit since, but, but to get past that and not to let those past experiences define me of like feeling like a victim of abuse and my parent not caring about me enough and feeling like they only cared about themselves, right? Those were my feelings. I'm not super clear on his feelings of why it happened, and that's fine. It's not my responsibility to know that, right? But I had to make the decision to forgive myself. I did that too, but we'll get to that. To forgive him of this indiscretion, okay? And a lot of people, it might not be as easy for you to do that because maybe you were hurt in a different way. Maybe it involved like something way more inappropriate. And that sucks. That sucks. And I want to say but there's not really any but. That sucks. However, we have to learn to forgive and let those things go, or they will hold us captive for forever. And no one wants to live a life in captivity, especially in their mind. Ugh, that would suck. It does suck. So I made the decision to forgive my dad and be like, okay, you know what? He did this thing. I didn't appreciate it. It really broke our relationship, but I'm going to let it go, because if I continue to ruminate about it and really obsess about this pain and anguish that he gave, I will continue to have this thought of like, oh my gosh, like, why did he do this to me? And I feel like a victim, and I feel so hurt, and how am I going to trust other people, and blah, 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 right? It really just like boils down to so many different levels. And so I was like, no, I'm just going to forgive him, and I'm going to forgive like the things that he continually does and the things that he has done in the past before that, and not let it define who I am. Just because the way he treated me doesn't mean that I deserved it, right? It doesn't mean that that was the way that it was supposed to go, but that is the way that it did go. And you can't change what happened. And it's unfortunate when these things happen to us, but we are stronger from it. So I forgave him. And then I forgave myself for taking so long to forgive him, because it did take a while, of course, and forgive myself for thinking that this damaged my worth, right? This affected the worth that I had, which it did not. Absolutely, it did not. So, just a quick example of how you don't want your past to define you. You got to forgive who hurt you, and then you got to forgive yourself, right? Because there's not always going to be someone else that you need to forgive. A lot of times it could be just yourself, right? If you went through an experience and you made the mistake and the failure and you were the one to blame or whatever, you got to take that responsibility. But there are other times where there are other people that are involved where you have to forgive them too, right? Okay, so the second one is think about the person you want to be, not who you feel like you have to be. So this goes back to me talking about how sometimes people feel like they have to wear a mask so that other people can't like look through them. They don't feel as transparent. They won't see the wreckage. They won't see the pain and the destruction that you have had in your life in the past, right? And you want to pretend to be someone that is likable and acceptable and it's not broken. We're all trying to pretend like we're not broken when we are. And if we all would just be more vulnerable about the fact that we are all broken and we're all getting through it, and maybe offering advice to other people on how you got through it and vice versa, then we could all be stronger together. That's a utopia. But it would be nice. But yeah, think about the person you want to be, not who you feel like you have to be. I felt like I had to be perfect. I felt like I had to be super likable and acceptable, and that person that is friends with everyone and that doesn't agree, that always just goes along and always pleases everyone and goes 10,000 extra miles every single time, and thinks about myself maybe at the bitter end when I have to, because that might also affect someone else. No, you need to think about the person that you want to be and then go after being that person, right? Because you will think that all of whatever happened in your past will prevent you from being this amazing person because you think you're damaged. You think you're damaged goods, right? A lot of us think that, and it's not true, okay? We might have gotten damaged during these experiences, but we do heal and rise above and become stronger and move forward if we allow ourselves to. But we can also allow ourselves to sit in the pit of despair, which I talk about a lot, and just feel like a victim, feel sorry for ourselves. It's not healthy, but a lot of us do it. So you can't do that, though. You can't be that person that you would really aspire to be if you're sitting in the pit constantly complaining about the person that you think that you are. You can be who you want to be. You just have to put in the work, right? So whatever happened to you, even if it was super terrible, you are not defined by those things. Those things don't prevent you from being a star. They don't prevent you from being amazing and accepted and loved and cared for and smart and attractive and beautiful and desirable. Desired, not desirable. Well, both, maybe. So anyway, you got to think about the person that you want to be, not who you think you are, not this broken person that you think you are, and the how you kind of portray yourself. No, you got to think about who you want to be and then go after that person. The third one is to fight against your fear of judgment. So when I was writing these notes, I was thinking, yeah, fight against your fear. But I decided no, we needed to be very specific about the fear here, because it's not just fear in general. Fear in general can definitely rule our lives if we allow it. Fear is actually false evidence appearing real. That's how a lot of people characterize it. I agree with that. It's actually a quote that's written on my wall, so I can remind myself of it every single day. But I was like, no, we need to be very specific, because when we feel like we are defined by our past, we are fearing the judgment of others. And I want you to fight against that fear. Fight against that fear of judgment, because regardless of whether you are perfect or you're just being your regular old self, someone will judge you. Someone will judge you if you're perfect because they'll think you're too perfect. They'll think you're hiding something. They'll think that you're fake. They're jealous of you. So they'll find something to judge about you. But if you're just your regular old self and you try not to care most of the time that, some people don't like you, or, these terrible things happen in your past, so you made big mistakes, but you're rising above it. You're becoming stronger. You're still on your journey. There's still going to be people that are going to judge you, but they're caught up in their own problems. And that's where they're deciding to take the moment to judge you, They can't look at themselves in the mirror and deal with their own problems, so they would rather attack someone else's. Want to poke fun at someone else because it's too painful to poke themselves. So that's why we need to fight against our fear of judgment, because it's going to happen anyway. It really is. And whether you know about it or not. And obviously it's harder when you know about it, but I want you to know there's someone out there judging you, even if you don't know it. It could be someone that you just randomly encounter on the street on your way to work or on your way to school or on your way to wherever you're going, right? It could be someone that you know really close to you that's pretending that they like you and they don't. I don't want to get you all worried about the people in your life, but I'm just saying we shouldn't care, because if they're taking the time to judge you, then that's really more reflective on who they are and what they spend their time doing rather than working on themselves. We all should just be working on ourselves so we can come together and be greater as a greater good. That's what I believe. Number 4 is to reflect more on how those experiences, those in your past, made you stronger, not weaker. So, for me, the example of going home and my father being physically violent with me, instead of really thinking about how hurt I was and how sad I was, that it just knowing in that moment, not necessarily in that moment, but shortly thereafter, this was the end, the beginning of the end of our relationship, really. And being sad about it and feeling battered down and like a victim and all this stuff. No, I would need to reflect more on, okay, I went through this experience. I was able to come out the other side, and I did fight back a little bit. So at least I knew that in my mind. And now I'm stronger to know that if someone comes at me with that kind of lead up that my dad had, what he's talking about, or these physical mannerisms, that I will need to fight harder sooner. And I need to understand that this does not affect my worth. This does not affect who I am or what I'm all about. When other people are pressing themselves on you and having violence and pain towards you, regardless of what, they say you said to them or they say you did to them, it's still not fair. It's still not something that you earned or that you deserved, right? It's not. And so I will reflect on that. I will reflect on the fact that now I'm stronger and I know that that is inappropriate. And I also know I will never let that happen to my child, right? And I would never do that to my child. And I will just be more aware. I'll be more aware of how maybe kids that my daughter knows will be acting, because they'll maybe act the same way that I acted growing up, and I'll maybe be able to spot some red flags, warning signs that they're going through the same kind of abuse, right? So just reflect more on the experiences, flip it and think okay, well, how did this make me stronger and a better person, than really focusing on how it made you feel weak in the moment. And again, you're rising above it. Number 5, the final one, to kind of cap this off, is Surround yourself with people that accept you for you and who you're becoming. So, people that accept you for who you are and who you are becoming. Because who you are today may not be who you are tomorrow or next week or next month or 5 years from now. For sure, we're all evolving and changing. And like I say, becoming our best selves every single day. Because it's a journey that's going to continually happen until we leave this earth. We're always becoming our best selves because some days it's easy and some days it's really hard. And sometimes it's just medium. And if we are surrounded by people that love us and care for us and accept our faults and know that we're not perfect and that's not a qualification for them being in your lives, then that's amazing. And then they will be there for you when you fall or when you trip or when you're, sky high and excelling and achieving at everything. And you're working on becoming the person that you ultimately want to become. And you're there for them as well. And that is really helpful. It's good to have a good support system around you because it makes going through those hard times a little easier. Someone to lean on, and then vice versa. It's always nice to be a support for someone else because it just feels so good to love on someone else and be there for them. Because you know what it feels when someone is there for you. So I just want to end this by telling you that you need and I need to tell yourself that you are defined by how you rise out of the pits of despair, not how you fell into those, right? We always are focused on how we fall into the pit, but not how we rise out of it, how we crawled out of it, how we, asked for a hand to be pulled out of it. And that's more important. Because it's easy to fall in the pit, but it's hard to get out. And that's more important. So, well, thank you so much for listening to the Real Positive Girl podcast again with me, Sabrina. I really appreciate you listening, downloading, and sharing the show. It's so amazing. Again, check the show notes for the show. Also, where to find me on Instagram at Sabrina Joy Perozzo. And my email address, which is realpositivegirl@gmail.com. But until next time, have a good one. And I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.